The desert night lay still under the weight of silence, broken only by the low howl of the wind across the dunes. James Caldwell tightened his grip on his revolver, whispering to himself that peace never lasted long in these lands. A sudden crack of gunfire shattered the quiet, echoing like thunder across the barren plains. Sarah Whitfield screamed as a shadow moved swiftly near the campfire, her voice piercing the night with fear. Daniel Reyes shouted, "Stay low, Sarah, don't let them see you." The flames flickered wildly as dust swirled, casting distorted shapes on the canvas of the night sky. James Caldwell's heart pounded, each beat reminding him of past betrayals he could never bury. The smoke from the fire curled into the starlit darkness, carrying with it the scent of burning mesquite wood. In the distance, Sheriff Marcus Steele's silhouette appeared, his polished badge gleaming faintly against the firelight. "Show yourself, Caldwell," Marcus Steele said, his tone laced with menace and authority. James Caldwell steadied himself, the weight of the past pressing down on his soul, and whispered, "This ends tonight." The silence that followed the gunshot weighed heavily across the desert, carrying with it the taste of dust and fear. James Caldwell's hand trembled, but his gaze stayed firm on the shadows beyond the fire. Daniel Reyes whispered, "James, there's more than one out there." The fire cracked, as if mocking his words, each spark rising like a fleeting warning into the night sky. Sarah Whitfield clutched her shawl tighter, her eyes darting toward the looming silhouette of Marcus Steele. Sheriff Marcus Steele's voice rolled across the dunes with icy calmness. "Justice is coming for you, Caldwell. You can't run forever." James Caldwell muttered under his breath, "It isn't justice you're after, Marcus. It's blood." The campfire's glow cast long, sharp shadows that danced like spirits across the sand, as if the desert itself knew the truth of his words. The campfire hissed as the wind shifted, carrying embers high into the sky. James Caldwell scanned the horizon, his past sins rising in memory with each shadow that shifted. Sarah Whitfield said, "James, you can't fight them all." Daniel Reyes tightened his grip on his rifle, his youth betrayed by his shaking hands. He forced a smile, saying, "I've been waiting for this." Marcus Steele's shadow grew larger as he stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel with calculated rhythm. James Caldwell whispered to himself, "The desert has no mercy, and neither do I." The sound of steel cocking against steel echoed as revolvers were readied, and the stars above shivered in the cold silence that followed. The night pressed heavier as the circle of danger closed in. James Caldwell moved a step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the sand, each step a reminder of old regrets. Sarah Whitfield's voice cracked as she pleaded, "James, please, don't do this." Daniel Reyes snapped, "He doesn't have a choice." Sheriff Marcus Steele's lips curved into a thin smile, his shadow stretching like a viper across the desert floor. He said, "Every man answers for his sins, Caldwell, and tonight it's your turn." James Caldwell stood rigid, the revolver steady in his grasp, his resolve ironclad against the judgment looming in Steele's voice. The fire roared higher as if feeding on the tension that thickened the desert air. James Caldwell's eyes locked on Marcus Steele's, two men bound by betrayal and years of blood. Sarah Whitfield whispered desperately, "There must be another way." Daniel Reyes raised his rifle, defiance sparking in his young eyes. Marcus Steele spat into the sand and said, "The desert buries cowards, Caldwell. Pick up your fate." James Caldwell's voice rumbled low, "I buried enough in this sand already. You'll be the last." The night seemed to hold its breath, the stars hidden by drifting dust as destiny hovered in the firelit standoff. Dawn crept slowly across the desert, staining the sand with pale gold as silence replaced the night's fury. James Caldwell stood apart from the others, the revolver heavy at his side, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Sarah Whitfield's voice carried softly, "James, you can't outrun what's inside you." Daniel Reyes sat cross-legged near the dying embers, his youthful face drawn tight with fatigue. He said, "We'll fight them, James, no matter what it takes." The desert air was thin, the cold morning biting against worn skin. Sheriff Marcus Steele's echo still lingered in James Caldwell's mind like a curse, etched deep. James Caldwell whispered to himself. It's not just Steele. It's the ghosts of everything I've done. The fire hissed and died, leaving only smoke that rose into the pale sky, marking the fragile peace of morning. As the first rays struck the desert floor, Sarah Whitfield's thoughts turned inward, haunted by the choices that led her here. Her eyes narrowed on James Caldwell, the man both cursed and burdened by his past. She whispered, "You carry too much alone." James Caldwell answered coldly, "It's the only way to keep others from breaking." Daniel Reyes interrupted with fire in his voice, "We're already in this together." The desert wind picked up, carrying grains of sand that stung like needles against them. James Caldwell turned his face away from them, ashamed of the truth etched in his silence. Sarah Whitfield touched her torn dress and muttered, "The desert always demands its price." The sound of a lone crow echoed above, a dark omen drifting with the wind. The group moved slowly across the dunes, every step dragging like a memory of the night before. James Caldwell's boots sank deep, his silence heavy, while Daniel Reyes marched beside him with restless resolve. Daniel Reyes said, "I won't let Steele take you." James Caldwell gave him a sharp look and replied, "It isn't me he's after, it's the truth." Sarah Whitfield followed close behind, her shawl drawn tight as her voice cracked. Truth only brings more pain. The rising sun burned the horizon, washing the sky with harsh reds that bled across the endless sand. James Caldwell muttered under his breath, "Pain is all I've got left." The desert's silence swallowed their words, leaving only the crunch of boots and the whisper of the wind. They reached a dry creek bed where silence deepened, and the sand gave way to cracked stone. James Caldwell paused, staring at the jagged rocks, memories bleeding into the present. Sarah Whitfield asked, "What happened here?" James Caldwell replied quietly, "A mistake I can't bury." Daniel Reyes scanned the cliffs nervously, saying, "This place feels cursed." The shadows of vultures circled overhead, their wings slicing against the burning sky. Sarah Whitfield tightened her grip on her shawl and whispered, "The desert remembers everything." James Caldwell pressed his hand against the stone, whispering words too soft to hear, but the pain in his voice cut deeper than the silence. The air grew hotter, and silence pressed on them like a weight as they climbed the rocky path. James Caldwell felt the past closing in, every step toward destiny heavier than the last. Sarah Whitfield's voice was sharp. "You think redemption is found at the end of a gun?" James Caldwell stopped and looked back, his face shadowed, and answered, "Redemption doesn't live in this desert." Daniel Reyes stepped forward, anger flaring, and shouted, "Then why fight at all?" James Caldwell's voice dropped to a low growl, "Because there are debts no man escapes." A vulture's cry echoed, its shadow crossing over their faces as the sun bore down. The desert seemed alive, watching them, whispering truths no one wanted to hear. The midday sun bore down mercilessly, baking the sand into white heat as James Caldwell led the group into a canyon of jagged stone. Daniel Reyes muttered, "This doesn't feel right, James." Sarah Whitfield's eyes scanned the cliffs and whispered, "It feels like a trap." A rock tumbled from above, shattering the silence, and dust rained down. James Caldwell gritted his teeth. "Marcus Steele knows every corner of this land. He is waiting." From the shadows, a rider appeared, a man clad in black with cold eyes that reflected cruelty. Sarah Whitfield whispered, "That's no drifter, that's Steele's man." Daniel Reyes tightened his grip on his rifle, defiance burning in his gaze. The canyon walls pressed closer, the air thick with the promise of betrayal. The rider in black halted at the canyon's center, his horse stamping the ground with restless energy. His voice echoed, "Marcus Steele sends his regards." James Caldwell's hand hovered near his revolver, his face etched with years of scars and regret. Daniel Reyes shouted, "Tell him we're not running." The man in black smirked, "You're already dead, boy." Sarah Whitfield whispered, "James, don't." But James Caldwell's voice was sharp as steel. "He doesn't leave this canyon alive." A hawk screeched above, its shadow cutting across the rocky floor like a warning. The air quivered as silence descended again, waiting for the inevitable strike. The first shot cracked like thunder, ricocheting through the canyon walls. James Caldwell drew and fired with deadly precision, dust exploding near the rider in black. Daniel Reyes ducked, firing his rifle, the echo rolling endlessly. Sarah Whitfield screamed, her voice lost in the chaos. The rider's horse reared violently, throwing the man into the dirt, his black coat flaring like wings of a fallen crow. James Caldwell shouted, "Stay behind the rocks!" Sarah Whitfield stumbled toward cover, clutching her shawl as bullets sparked against stone. Daniel Reyes' rifle barked again, his youth colliding with the terror of war. The canyon became a furnace of gunfire, dust, and death. The rider in black crawled across the dust, blood staining his coat, as he spat curses at James Caldwell. James Caldwell stepped forward, revolver aimed steady, his jaw set like stone. The man sneered, "Marcus Steele will carve your name into the sand." Sarah Whitfield cried out, "James, don't do it." Daniel Reyes' voice cracked, "End him before he calls the others." James Caldwell's eyes darkened, torn between vengeance and restraint. He whispered, "The desert already has enough graves." He pulled the hammer back, the click echoing louder than thunder. The canyon held its breath, as if time itself waited for his choice. James Caldwell fired once, the bullet striking the ground inches from the man's head, sending dust into his eyes. The rider cursed and collapsed, choking in fury. James Caldwell muttered, "Tell Steele I'm still breathing." Sarah Whitfield exhaled, relief trembling through her. Daniel Reyes lowered his rifle reluctantly, muttering, "You should finished him." James Caldwell turned, his face worn with anguish. Killing him won't bury the past. The canyon walls loomed taller, shadows lengthening as if the desert itself disapproved. Far off, another echo of hoofbeats drifted toward them. Sarah Whitfield whispered, "He isn't done with us yet." James Caldwell's gaze hardened, the fire of old battles burning once more. The canyon gave way to open plains, where the sun blazed mercilessly, and silence clung to the air like smoke. James Caldwell led with a weary stride, his revolver swinging at his hip. Daniel Reyes muttered, "We shouldn't have let him live." Sarah Whitfield's tone trembled. Killing him would have chained James to the same darkness. A lone rider emerged on the horizon, dust trailing his horse like a shroud. James Caldwell stiffened, his voice heavy. "That's no stranger." As the figure drew near, the wind carried the faint jingle of spurs and a haunting melody of a woman's laugh. Sarah Whitfield froze, whispering, "It can't be." The rider revealed a figure they thought lost. Elena Marquez. Once a ghost from James Caldwell's past, now alive and bound to Marcus Steele. Elena Marquez halted her horse, her piercing eyes scanning the group as silence pressed like a weight. James Caldwell's throat tightened, whispering, "Elena." She smiled faintly, a cold curl of lips. "You left me for dead, James." Sarah Whitfield stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're working with Marcus Steele." Elena Marquez tilted her head. "Better the devil who gives me life than the one who abandoned me." Daniel Reyes snapped, "We don't need your poison here." The horse pawed the sand, restless under her command, dust swirling like smoke around hooves. James Caldwell's chest burned with guilt. "I thought you were gone, Elena." Her laugh cut like a knife. "I was. Until Steele gave me reason to rise." The wind rose, scattering grit across their faces as tension deepened. James Caldwell muttered, "You were my only salvation, Elena." She sneered, "And you were my ruin." Sarah Whitfield's voice wavered. "She's lying, James. Don't let her twist you." Elena Marquez leaned forward in the saddle, her tone dripping venom. "Marcus Steele owns me now, body and soul." Daniel Reyes growled, "Then you're as damned as him." James Caldwell's hand trembled near his revolver, torn between love's memory and betrayal's sting. Elena Marquez's eyes glistened for a fleeting moment, before hardening. "You broke me, James. Steele rebuilt me." The desert air vibrated with the weight of her words, each syllable cutting deeper than a blade. Elena Marquez dismounted, boots sinking into the sand as her cloak dragged like a shadow. She stepped closer, eyes fixed on James Caldwell with both rage and sorrow. "Did you ever mourn me?" she asked. James Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Every day." Sarah Whitfield's heart broke at his tone, whispering, "James, don't." Daniel Rey's voice thundered. "She's Steele's weapon now. Don't let her tear you apart." Elena Marquez's hand brushed the handle of her pistol, her lips quivering before she steadied herself. "Then today, James, I'll make you pay for both our deaths." The desert sun seared overhead, but all felt colder under her vow. The silence before violence stretched thin, like the string of a bow ready to snap. James Caldwell's voice cracked. "Elena, you don't have to do this." Elena Marquez raised her pistol slowly, her eyes shining with both fury and grief. Sarah Whitfield screamed. "She's gone, James!" Daniel Reyes fired a warning shot into the sand, shouting, "Back off!" Elena Marquez steadied her aim, whispering, "Steele wants you broken, and I'll be the one to break you." The desert stilled, the horizon trembling in heat waves, as if the earth itself recoiled from the moment. James Caldwell whispered, "Then let the desert judge us all." The standoff marked a turning point, betrayal carved into the heart of the story. The desert sky dimmed as storm clouds gathered, the air heavy with dust and dread. James Caldwell led the group toward the old mining town, his revolver never far from reach. Daniel Reyes muttered, "Steele won't wait much longer." Sarah Whitfield's voice broke, "Neither will Elena." James Caldwell's chest burned with conflict, every step weighed down by regret. Elena Marquez's laughter echoed from the ridges, mocking, sharp as glass. She shouted, "This is where you fall, James." Daniel Reyes growled, "Then let her come." James Caldwell whispered, "She's not the enemy I fear most." The abandoned town appeared ahead, buildings leaning like bones of a forgotten war. The storm winds roared, carrying the scent of vengeance and the promise of blood. The group entered the silent mining town, its wooden facades creaking under the weight of the storm. James Caldwell paused, eyes sweeping the rooftops. "Steele's men are here." Daniel Reyes whispered, "I see movement by the saloon." Sarah Whitfield trembled. "It feels like death itself waits here." Elena Marquez emerged from the shadows, pistol drawn, her voice cutting. "James, every road you take leads back to me." James Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Then let this road end tonight." The clap of thunder shook the air, lightning flashing across broken signs and shattered windows. Daniel Reyes muttered, "They're surrounding us." James Caldwell's breath slowed, his hand steady. "Good, let them come." Gunfire erupted, shattering the silence as Steele's men unleashed fury from the rooftops. James Caldwell fired back, his revolver cracking loud against thunder. Daniel Reyes ducked, firing his rifle toward the saloon balcony. Sarah Whitfield screamed, her shawl torn as bullets ripped through the wood around her. Elena Marquez moved with deadly grace, her pistol spitting fire as she circled closer. James Caldwell shouted, "Keep her alive." Daniel Reyes barked, "Why?" James Caldwell roared, "Because she's the key to Steele." The storm raged, rain mixing with dust as the battle painted the town with smoke and blood. Shadows of death flickered with each flash of lightning. The saloon doors burst open, and Marcus Steele strode out with polished boots and silver badge gleaming under storm light. His voice thundered above the chaos, "Caldwell, this is where it ends." James Caldwell's revolver froze in his hand as rage flared in his chest. Daniel Reyes shouted, "It's him!" Sarah Whitfield gasped, her voice trembling. "He's been waiting for this." Elena Marquez's smirk faltered, her eyes flickering between Steele and James Caldwell. Steele's voice cut deep. "You destroyed everything, and now I'll return the favor." James Caldwell stepped forward into the rain, whispering, "No more running." The storm crashed above as Destiny stood in the doorway of the saloon. The storm hammered down, drowning the town in chaos as the final pieces fell into place. Marcus Steele raised his revolver, his voice calm. "This desert belongs to me." James Caldwell answered, "Not while I still breathe." Daniel Reyes moved to flank, defiance blazing in his eyes. Sarah Whitfield shouted, "Stop this before it's too late." Elena Marquez's pistol shook, torn between Steele's command and James Caldwell's memory. Steele sneered, "Choose, Elena." Her breath caught, eyes locked on James Caldwell. The thunder rolled, the lightning froze them all in silver light. James Caldwell whispered, "The desert will judge us all." And in that silence, destiny braced for the storm's deadliest strike. Rain poured in sheets, pounding against the rooftops of the broken town as Marcus Steele stepped forward, his revolver gleaming in the stormlight. James Caldwell's boots pressed into the mud, his eyes never leaving Steele's. Sarah Whitfield clung to the saloon doorway, shouting, "James, don't throw your soul away!" Daniel Reyes flanked low, rifle ready, muttering, "One shot, James, and it ends." Elena Marquez aimed her pistol, her hands trembling, her voice cracking. "Steele gave me a reason to live. But you gave me a reason to hate." Marcus Steele sneered, "Love and hate make weak men crumble." James Caldwell steadied his revolver, whispering through the storm, "Then let's see who crumbles first." The first shot split the storm, Marcus Steele firing at James Caldwell, the bullet striking wood behind him. James Caldwell returned fire, sparks flying as rounds clashed. Daniel Reyes darted into the street, rifle barking thunder into the rain. Sarah Whitfield screamed, her voice drowned by the roar of gunfire. Elena Marquez hesitated, her pistol wavering between Steele and Caldwell, her heart trapped between past and present. Steele roared, "Choose, Elena." James Caldwell shouted, "He's using you." Thunder shook the earth as gunfire echoed through the drowned town, each shot carving destiny into the storm. Daniel Reyes ducked behind a wagon, rain soaking his hair as bullets shattered wood inches from his face. He yelled, "James, he's pushing us back." James Caldwell's revolver thundered again, his breath sharp and heavy. Sarah Whitfield cried, "Stop this madness before it kills us all." Marcus Steele advanced, coat flaring, his badge glimmering in each lightning flash. He shouted, "The desert remembers only the strong." Elena Marquez lowered her pistol, her voice raw, "I'm not your weapon, Steele." James Caldwell looked at her through the storm, his voice breaking, "Then prove it." The thunder rolled like drums of war as time slowed around her choice. Elena Marquez turned sharply, pistol raised at Marcus Steele, her voice breaking, "You used me, Marcus." Steele's eyes blazed with fury, "And I'll use you till the desert swallows you whole." She fired, the shot ripping across the storm and striking his shoulder. Marcus Steele staggered but roared back, his revolver cracking into the night. James Caldwell shouted, "Now, Reyes." Daniel Reyes' rifle spat fire, hitting Marcus Steele's revolver and sending it clattering into the mud. Sarah Whitfield sobbed, her hands gripping the doorway as lightning froze the moment into silver. James Caldwell moved forward, revolver trained, his voice shaking, "It ends here." Marcus Steele dropped to his knees, blood mixing with rain, his badge glinting faintly in the mud. James Caldwell stood over him, revolver steady, his chest heaving with rage and sorrow. Marcus Steele's voice rasped, "Kill me, Caldwell, or forever live in my shadow." Elena Marquez whispered, "End him, James, or he'll rise again." Daniel Reyes urged, "This is justice." Sarah Whitfield cried, "Don't damn your soul." James Caldwell's hand shook, thunder cracking as his decision lingered in silence. He whispered, "The desert buries enough." He lowered his revolver, turning away as Steele collapsed, defeated. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a man who chose mercy over vengeance. The storm faded into a hushed drizzle, leaving the mining town in ruins, its mud streets littered with echoes of violence. James Caldwell stood beneath the broken sign of the saloon, revolver still heavy in his hand. Sarah Whitfield approached slowly, whispering, "It's over, James." Daniel Reyes wiped the rain from his eyes, muttering, "Over for Steele maybe, but not for us." Elena Marquez holstered her pistol, her face torn between defiance and regret. James Caldwell's voice was hollow. "The desert always takes what it wants." A crow circled above, its cry splitting the silence as the rain slowed to mist. The survivors stood beneath the gray sky, knowing the desert had written another chapter in blood. The muddy streets gleamed in weak sunlight breaking through the storm clouds. James Caldwell looked at Marcus Steele's lifeless body sprawled in the mud, the badge half buried beneath water and grit. Daniel Reyes spat into the dirt. That's what power amounts to. Sarah Whitfield closed her eyes, whispering, another man swallowed by the desert. Elena Marquez knelt by Steele's body, her face unreadable as she whispered, he gave me purpose when I had none. James Caldwell turned, his voice firm, no man owns another's soul. The silence hung like a shroud as the town settled into uneasy calm. They gathered near the fire ruins in the center of town, its embers glowing faintly under the gray sky. Sarah Whitfield spoke gently. The desert doesn't forgive, but it remembers. Daniel Reyes gripped his rifle, his voice steady. Then we'll give it something worth remembering. James Caldwell stared into the embers, his voice rough. I've carried too much death already. Elena Marquez lowered her eyes, whispering, you spared Steele when you could have ended him sooner. That mercy will follow you. Sarah Whitfield touched James Caldwell's arm softly, saying, it's not mercy, it's strength. The embers hissed as rain dripped, smoke curling into the air like whispered prayers. The survivors prepared to leave the town, the desert stretching endlessly before them, golden beneath the clearing sky. James Caldwell saddled his weary horse, his voice low. The road ahead is no lighter than the one behind. Daniel Reyes climbed into his saddle, answering, then we ride until the desert has no more ghosts to give us. Sarah Whitfield adjusted her shawl, whispering, I'll ride as long as hope rides with us. Elena Marquez mounted her horse, her face shadowed, saying, I may never outrun my choices, but I'll face them in the open. Together they turned toward the horizon, the sun breaking through the clouds like a wound of light in the desert sky. As they rode into the horizon, the desert wind carried whispers of battles past, its voice eternal. James Caldwell looked ahead, his face etched with scars of loss yet lined with quiet resolve. Sarah Whitfield rode close, whispering prayers the desert would never hear. Daniel Reyes' voice rang steady. This is not the end, only another beginning. Elena Marquez turned once toward the ruined town, her cloak trailing, her eyes filled with shadows of memory. The sun dipped low, setting the sand aflame with colors of blood and fire. James Caldwell whispered into the wind, the desert buries everything, but it never forgets. Their silhouettes vanished into the burning sky, leaving only whispers of the desert behind.